Welcome to North Node, the Yoga and Astrology Podcast. I'm Becky, a yoga teacher, astrologist, and businesswoman.
And I'm Laura, founder of Soul Sanctuary Studios, yoga teacher trainer, and wellness coach and consultant. In this podcast, we'll be diving into down-to-earth but deep soul conversations.
We'll explore how you can connect and stay on purpose with your true north alignment through the transformative lenses of yoga and astrology.
Each episode is designed to inspire and guide you on your own journey towards self-discovery, self-love, and personal growth. We'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. Your support will help us reach more listeners who are looking for insightful discussions and meaningful connection.
Thanks so much for joining us. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Okay, so this is our first ever podcast and very excited about that. And we thought that we would start at the beginning, which is probably how we both got into yoga to start with, and then how our journeys have moved into astrology. So if I start with my story, Beck, and then you can do yours.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Perfect. So my story is that it's I think it's over 10 years ago now, which is quite scary.
Oh my goodness.
I know. But yeah, over 10 years ago, I was not the yoga type at all. So this is when I was in my corporate life. And this will be so interesting when we look at the astrology as to like those different phases of our lives. And I was, in a global advertising agency, super busy, traveling a lot, presenting abroad, and thinking initially that I'd cracked it, that I was living this life that I'd always wanted. And I'd always been, a super hard worker. Like, what I came to realize a lot of that was to please other people, and namely my dad. But at the time I didn't know that, and I was just going for it in this, all I've ever wanted city girl thing. And then fairly quickly I hit burnout, and that came with anxiety and depression, and it was coming on. I mean, I was at the point where I was living in Putney at the time, and the office was first it was Marylebone, and then it moved to Bank. And I couldn't get on the tube. So I would get on the tube, but then I would have a panic attack. And bearing in mind this is over 10 years ago, so people weren't really talking about panic attacks then. And I didn't call them panic attacks at the time. It was just that I would profusely sweat, as in I would sit in the tube and the sweat would be dripping off my nose. It was that bad. My heart was pounding. I couldn't breathe. And the doors would open to the tube and I'd just get off. And it honestly took me, I probably had 1 or 2 of those nearly every morning. And more if there was a presentation or if it was a real chill day, not. But that was, when I look back at that, I'm like, how did I do that for years? I mean, just awful for my nervous system. And then you can imagine what I was like during work, just no boundaries, over-pleasing, over-giving, just gave my soul, basically. And don't get me wrong, I loved parts of it because it was like this dream and I was doing it and I loved the people, but I knew in my bones, in my body, it wasn't good for me. And I knew it had to change, but I wasn't brave enough basically to make the leap. And then Dad passed away. So Dad had his heart attack. And that was just a huge wake up for me. I was in my early 20s and we kind of knew it was coming, but as prepared as I thought I was, it completely floored me. And why it floored me, I think, other than the fact that obviously I was going to miss him not being in my life, was this realization that everything I had been doing in my life, really everything up until that point, was to make him proud, was to please him, was for his approval. And then he was no longer in the equation. And I just sat there. I remember I took a really short bereavement. I got a bit of counseling and I was like, I'm fine, I'm strong. I don't do bereavement, straight back to the office. And was looking at this to-do list and was just there's nothing in the world that can make me complete these tasks. I just don't care, and I don't have the drive to do it. And so I left, and everyone thought I'd come back because it was just I was still grieving. And then I knew this was time for change. And And so when I literally left the office, I remember getting in the lift, calling my best mate, Cecilia, who you've
Yeah.
met, and getting on the train to her house, to Isha. And she said to me, this isn't a nice thing to hear, but I think you've needed this. And I think this is time for you to do what you want and figure out what that is. She's always been so wise. And I did. And I had no idea what that was, but I'd got into yoga to cope. I was at rock bottom. I couldn't do all the like hit and spin and all the usual stuff, the competitive stuff that I used to do. And it saved me. And that is the cliche, and I know it. I don't care, so I'm proud of it in a way that it's just like I did that thing where I walked into the class, 45-minute class, beginners class, and the talk was all about listen to your body, do what feels right, take the easy option. You've got no one to please here, no one to impress, and I was just like, what is this madness, witchcraft that this lady's talking about? And I remember looking at her and just thinking, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. So I was on their 30-day trial in the yoga studio. It was in Putney, the House of Yoga, actually. I will name drop it because it was like really transformative for me. Amazing place. And then I did my yoga teacher training on my 30-day trial at the studio. So genuinely, I just about knew what a downward facing dog is, but I did not know the alignment. There were so many poses I did not know what they were. I could not do anything fancy like, I don't know, crow pose inversions, none of that. And they accepted me. And now, what are we, over 10 years later? So I left advertising, and then I actually started teaching yoga in the agency where I was working, which was terrifying to like show a kind of real me, I guess, and what I loved, but also amazing because I had so much support. And yeah, that was the turning point really, because then basically what happened was lots of other corporates started asking me to teach yoga in their offices through kind of my friends of mine in the classes who were telling their colleagues that we were doing it in the company. And I became this weird like yoga agent because I couldn't teach them all because I was still working in the agency whilst I was doing my training. And so the girls on my yoga teacher training course, I then would like put them in to some of these other offices. And then I quit. And then basically we just did that. I was just teaching in offices, also teaching in gyms, and just trying to make a living through teaching yoga. I'd moved home. So just, started again, basically. And then Sam, who I was with at the time, moved to Worcester. He was playing for Harlequins and then moved to Worcester Warriors. And I went with him. Which was a huge step for me because I felt really vulnerable, like moving away from my life to someone else's life, and I had no idea where Worcester was. Genuinely, I couldn't have put it on a map, but I knew I wanted out. I wanted to like run away really from London, and kind of from home. When I look back, like I just wanted a fresh start. So yeah, I moved to Worcester, and then he got his career-ending injury, which was terrible timing because I just moved my life there to be in Worcester, and then his contract ended in Worcester, and it was like, oh, now what? And then he was like, we really then started to work on him. It was like, right, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do yoga. However, I figure that out. What do you want to do with your life? And he was like, I just want to run a cafe. And I was like, okay, well then, me and all my yoga empowerment was like, well, do that. And I remember like sitting on his sofa creating the logo. I mean, it's bonkers. So Wayland's Yard came to life, and then he took on the premises. Somebody accepted him to take on a coffee shop, and there was a space upstairs, and he was like, well, it's too big for me. Do you want to do yoga up there? And I was like, oh, not really. Like, I don't know what I'm doing yet. And now, like, fast forward. So yeah, there was no yoga in Worcester at the time, really.
No, like okay, you're known in Worcester, aren't you? You're like Yoga Laura.
Yeah, it's so true. No one knows my last name. They're like, oh, which Laura? Yoga Laura. Ah, yeah. So we started teaching there. I was then burning out again because I was teaching. It was like 4 or 5 classes a day, every day. It was bonkers. And so I told Jason, the guy who ran the House of Yoga, and he was like, we'll come up and run a yoga teacher training. So he came up and ran it, and then I ran the next ones myself, basically. And so it was amazing because all those people that I met, like in the cafe who just came to try a bit of yoga that had never done it before, after obviously a while then, they started teaching. And they're like some of our original teachers today, you know, at the studio. Um, and then Sam and I went our separate ways, which was like so amicable. And I needed a bigger premises. And then we took on Spetchly. And so now we have, yeah, we've got Spetchly, we run yoga teacher training several times a year. You know, we've got classes all day, every day at the studio, a huge teaching team of teachers that, you know, we've qualified and living my best life, I guess. You know, and I do feel like that. It's been such a journey, but I just love what I do. Like, I love teaching the yoga teacher trainings. I do corporate wellness consultancy because I still care so much about helping people in that environment. Um, and now really excited to be doing this podcast. So I guess that's my journey into yoga, and I'll stop there because that's a lot from me, and then we can talk about astrology after you, Beck.
Yay! Well, my question for you though, Laura, is obviously with what happened with your dad, do you feel like you would have found yoga anyway?
No,
Yeah.
I really feel like that because I'd still be trying to please him if he was here for sure. Because that was so powerful. That was, you know, so I don't think I would have done.
Mm.
Yeah.
I just think it's always, yeah, even when tough things happen, when we can look back and kind of, we talk about this a lot on the teacher trainings, right? Like positively blame things. It sort of helps us make peace with what's happened as well.
Totally, and like not even, yeah, positively blame's kind of where I started. But I'm so grateful for what I do. I'm so grateful for like everything in my life. Not always, like I don't want to be really Pollyanna and positive about it. Like, you know, I have my grumpy days and stuff's still really hard, and I'm sure we'll get to that with the business and like, but ultimately, like I love the life that I've created, and also the hardest lessons that I've been through are what I've grown from the most and also have given me the tools to help. So if somebody comes to me and they want coaching on bereavement, like, you know, I can hand on heart say I know if there's anxiety and depression and burnout from work and all the rest, all this stuff that we go through are the gifts and the tools that we can then use to help others. So I'm really grateful for all of it. Um, yeah.
Mm. So, moving on to my story.
Moving
So,
on to you. Come
moving
on.
on to me. So, yeah, I mean, I met Laura through coming to Soul Sanctuary to the studio to take a class, and I was suffering from burnout too. So, in a way, like our stories are quite synonymous in that respect. I was a bit older, so I think I was like 38 or something when I first came to Soul Sanctuary. And yeah, I was at a point in my life similar, really. Like, I feel like I'd lived in a lot of ways someone else's life. Um, I definitely fallen for all the good girl conditioning, and had like a really successful career. I still have that career. I still work in corporate, but we were going through some really challenging stuff in the business. Been in a business partnership with someone who was completely mental, and he ended up leaving the business, and I was left with all these projects to finish that were in the middle of London. I had two kids. My eldest child was, I think she was like 5, and then my little one, she was pretty small. She was only 2, and I was traveling to London all the time. And anyway, I ended up getting really sick and had pneumonia that was undiagnosed, and ended up collapsing in the doctors, like all of this stuff. And I'm never sick. And then I was like, okay, I know I need to start taking better care of myself. And it was funny because my hairdresser at the time had been going on about Soul Sanctuary and how amazing it was for probably like the 3 years that I've been going to her. And I was like, oh no, like yoga's not for me. Like, it's lying down on a mat. No, that, like, none of that stuff is for me, and I'm too busy. And so I never went. And then I was sick and I went to the hairdresser sick, and she was like, you know, you really should like try Soul Sanctuary, and they do this offer and you can do 30 days for £30 or whatever it was. And I felt so like I was all out of options really. And so I came to the studio, and actually I did a class, and I think the girl who taught my class, it was Jess, and she was only just qualified. And I was like, oh my God, like you've taught this class and you've just qualified, and it was so incredible. And I remember feeling close to tears like through a lot of the class. And that was a real shock to me because I had shut down a lot of my emotions. I was really numb. And I realize now with like the training and stuff that I've done and research on the nervous system that it was because my nervous system had just completely shut down and wasn't responsive anymore, that I felt so numb all of the times. I would find myself, I don't know, like being with my children and not really feeling anything, in my relationship, and even at work I was like quite, I don't know, like robotic really. And I did this class, and then pretty much I was at the studio every day after that, like every class I was there, and I felt amazing. And then one night I remember going to bed and like just being woken in the middle of the night and kind of receiving like this energy around like you need to train and do your yoga teach training. And I was like, that's madness. You know, I've got this job, I work in construction, like I've done that my whole life. And, you know, I'm going to run that company one day, like fully on my own. But this voice would not stop. And so in the end, I kind of succumbed to it. And I remember emailing you and being like, oh, I love your studio. It's amazing. And I hear that you do teach training. And you were like, yeah, we do. And we're starting one in 3 weeks, but it's full. So I was like, okay, like maybe I'll do the next one. And I was kind of like, oh, that's good, you know, because I might go off the idea by then. And like I was bought into it because I loved the experience of yoga, but I was kind of also really scared about it. And then I think you emailed me a couple of days later and you were like, let's meet for coffee because I feel like I can create you a space. And we did that. And then I did my yoga teach training with you, my 200-hour training. And that was back in 2018. And so that's kind of how we met. Like you trained me as a yoga teacher. And yeah, and then I started teaching yoga at the studio. And interestingly, like the very first class I taught at the studio was actually a yin class. Although I trained in vinyasa with you, vinyasa yoga, the first class that I covered was yin. And that has really been my passion since doing my teacher training. And I've gone on to do like quite a lot of yin trainings. And I developed the yin training that we now have at the studio. So kind of, yeah, our paths have sort of woven together in that respect. And yeah, I now assist you on the 200-hour as well. So that's kind of my story into yoga. And like the other thing that I feel like sharing is when I was a child, when I was probably like 6 or 7, I used to visit my grandma every weekend on a Saturday, and she would always buy us like books and games and stuff like that, usually from the charity shop. And one day I went, and in the basket that she used to have our stuff in the living room, there was this book, and it's like you can Google it and see the cover of this book because it's like not what yoga looks like now to us. But it was called Yoga for Your Children by Lynn Marshall. And it was like this woman in this leotard, and then she had like this array of children in different colored leotards next to her. But in the book there were like all the yoga poses, and like I remember triangle pose, and there was stuff like lion's breath, and I was like, oh, like this is really odd. but practicing it like in secret as a child, she let me take the book home and I would like practice these poses. And that was kind of just something that happened. But like when I look back now, I think when I first decided to do the yoga teacher training with you, like that memory came up and it felt like a massive sign from the universe. And even though I was totally not into signs from the universe back then, yeah, I'm a bit different now. Um, yeah, like I was just triggered to remember that, and I think it was one of the things that made me like follow the breadcrumbs and step up and do my yoga teacher training. So yeah, that's how Laura and I met. And then this podcast is called the Yoga and Astrology Podcast, and I feel like a lot of people will probably relate to this in terms of yoga is like a massive gateway drug into spirituality. And yeah, and so over the last few years, I've become really interested in, yeah, like spirituality really as a wider concept. And astrology really caught my attention. And yeah, so I started to train in that as well.
So I guess the first thing that I want to say when I listen to you speak, Beck, is like I genuinely get goosebumps now. And that sounds like a bit OTT, but that is what happens to my body now. Like it literally responds to words that I hear and when they've got so much truth in them and so much like, synchronicity. And that's what it feels like. We talk a lot about on teacher training about being on path and the red rubber band and how Dharma, we all have a purpose in this lifetime, and we're born for a reason and we all have a gift to give. And we'll talk about cynicism on stuff like that, because I was not ready to hear that stuff at that point and it felt way too over the top. And I've always kind of just put the bits that felt too much to the side and just concentrate on the bits that spoke to me. And now, I guess 10 years later, here I am, like, it is such a real thing, having purpose, having dharma and fulfilling it and being on path and crossing paths with the people that you're meant to at the time you're meant to. And that's what gives me goosebumps, because I feel like literally here now in this moment, we're supposed to be doing this. Everything has led us up to this point. And it's funny how like the teacher student relationship as well, in the way that we always say that there's teacher and student are all on the same hand. You're always a student, we're always learning from each other, and you're always teacher, you're always teaching in your way of being, if you're sharing your experience. And at one point in our journey I was teaching you yoga, and now I feel like you're my teacher. Like, what it's like. Anything that happens in my life, I'm like, Becky, what does it mean? I'm just so desperate to learn about astrology now. And I just love how our relationship has grown in that way. And I'm just so grateful, that you came into my life and that I have you in my life now as, yeah, as like a teacher is how I feel. So I think that's kind of beautiful. And I'd like to hear more about like how you got from yoga to astrology, if you can share on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for reflecting that, because I remember watching you teaching on the 200 hour and being like, oh my God, like she's just amazing. That at your age then as well, like the power in your transmissions on that training. And I feel really grateful to have seen like the evolution of Laura um, through like all the things that have happened in your life, because you've got two kids now, and I've seen a softening in your approach. And yeah, like it's so powerful when now like we can sit side by side on those trainings, and it always kind of does get me quite emotional to think, oh my God, it's not so long when I was sat watching you teach and having this real like, I want to be up there with her, I want to do that. And like here we are. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think, yeah, trusting the breadcrumbs, trusting the relationships and those feelings you get when you interact with someone is so powerful, because you can't, like, energy doesn't lie. And yeah, it shows up in those goosebumps and those feelings in your belly, and just like that strong desire to do something. And that's what happened with me, you know, even stepping onto the teacher training path in the first place. Because I remember thinking, oh, like, do I wait until next year, or do I just do my training somewhere else? And then, like, you know, you were like, no, we can, I'm going to create this space for you. And I was like the 13th person. I think you had 12
Yeah,
spaces, right?
that's right. There's always 12 that fit in the studio. Yeah. And I was like, this is going to be a squeeze. But like, if you want it, I think we can do it.
Yeah. And I was like the 13th woman on the training. Well, there was a man as well on our training, but like, yeah. And like 13 is supposed to be unlucky. And that's, I kind of felt that actually. I was like, oh, I'm going to be the 13th person. And oh, like, how does that feel? And now what I know about the number 13, it's like the most lucky number because we have 13 moons in a year.
Wow.
We have 13 menstrual cycles, ideally, you know. And like the number 13 is like really powerful and transformational for me now. But yeah, like that's been a whole journey. And I think as part of my journey into astrology, so I think how I got from yoga to astrology was, I think, probably my journey into yin, because what yin taught me was like how yang our lifestyle is, and like we're always doing. And yin is like the other side of the coin. So when you've got the yin yang symbol, yin is the black and yang is the white, and the two are always interconnected. So you've always got the black dot in the white and the white dot in the black. And it's like this idea that everything is interconnected. And then from yin, I also did qigong training, and qigong is very focused on the elements. And my teacher back then talked a lot about how like we as humans are the microcosm, and then the universe and the world and everything around us is the macrocosm, and how like whatever's showing up in our life is just a reflection of what's happening at a bigger scale in the universe, in the macrocosm, and that shows up in the seasons. And I think I just started like really reflecting on that and thinking, okay, like maybe there is something more to be like dive into here with like the stars and the planets. And I'd always been like so cynical about astrology, really. And I think, you know, we're conditioned to be cynical about it. It's, I remember like reading like, you know, 3 lines in Cosmopolitan magazine about like Sagittarius. So like, yeah, you know, like you're in for a lucky month, and thinking, oh my God, what a load of rubbish, right? And that is a lot of people's belief and thoughts about astrology. So I was super cynical about it. But then I think I got a reading and I was just blown away by the accuracy of like, I can't even remember who I went to for a reading to be able to reference her, but she talked to me about like actual events. She was able to pinpoint events in my life through looking at the movements of the planets. And I was just like you can't, she can't be making that up. She doesn't know me. She knows nothing about me. And it sort of gave more credibility to my beliefs around the interconnectedness of everything. And so, yeah, I started running people's astrology charts that I knew. And again, like seeing the accuracy and realizing like what we read in a magazine, I mean, it could be valid. It's probably not, but it could be valid for your sun sign. But then this understanding kind of transcended over me that we are all everything, and we are all a combination of all of the zodiac signs and all of the planets, but just in different combinations and in different ways. And so I thought, okay, like I love learning, I'm just going to do this for fun. And I did a human design training, and I did a couple of astrology trainings, and I was just like, oh, this is just so powerful. Because our podcast, right, is called The North Node, Yoga and Astrology Podcast. And the part of astrology that I probably love the most is the North Node and the South Node axis, which is the South Node is said to represent your karma, or what you're coming into this lifetime with. And the North Node is like where your soul wants to evolve towards. And I think yoga had already taught me, like, you're not your body, you're not your thoughts, you're so much more than that. And you're this universal energy that, you know, it is so much more than your body and your mind. That the idea that the idea that your soul transcends this lifetime, and that it's here to actually learn something and for a reason, is what your North and your South Node represent. And when I was able to look at my own chart through that lens, I guess I was more able to fully step into my own purpose. And I think we'll probably cover all of that, you know, like North Node stuff on another podcast. But yeah, that's kind of my journey into astrology.
It's so interesting because it's so like gently. It's just been a natural evolution of you following what you like. You know, it was fun, and so you did it. And I love that because these are the breadcrumbs, right? Just actually following joy rather than more cultural expectation or the pressure of the mortgage, or you know, all those things that practically up here in the head we can weigh up on paper and go, okay, well, I got to do that. But when we drop into like our heart and our gut and our intuition, our inner teacher and our listening and that connection to self, and just going, I'm just going to try this quite lightly, like where it can then take you. Which I think is so important to hear and to share. Okay, so my journey into astrology, well, firstly, has been listening to little bits and pieces from you, that you've been so gracious with this like volume of knowledge that you have. And I know what it's like knowing a lot about yoga and speaking to people who aren't into yoga, and everything in you wants to just be like, just do it and it's amazing, and this like over the top evangelical, shove it down their throat, right? And I probably did do that. My sister would say I did that. Well, early days when I was just qualified. And then with wisdom, you realize like the harder you push someone into something, the further they back away. And that, you know, really it's just you like being the change you want to see in the world. So you living the life, the yoga life, the astrology, whatever it is, and letting people do their own thing. But, you know, letting people know that you're doing it, so that when they then go, maybe there's something else, they come to you, and that's when they're ready then to like receive, you know, what it is that you need to share in this lifetime. And you've been so gracious with all of that knowledge, and like we spend a lot of time together on the trainings. And like before I was ready for astrology, because I was so cynical. I mean, I was so cynical about yoga, but this has been like the irony probably of my life, is that like all the things that I judge basically then come to me.
Yes,
And I'm
served
just
you.
served humble pie is like my regular appetite. And so, yeah, you know, I judged yoga. I thought it was a waste of time, people wafting around a yoga mat. You know, there was me, this slick Rick in the city doing hit and spin, all the rest of it. And then I hit burnout. And then you know, yoga's now become my life. All the things within yoga that I didn't want to touch, like yoga nidra, sound baths, all the stuff that just felt like, oh, too much. Now, you know, I'm qualified in nidra and I love a sound bath, and it's just ironic. So astrology was next on the list, I guess, and I was just so cynical about it. But I respected you. I knew that you were doing it, and it was like, you know, there must be something in this. And every now and then I'd ask a question, but I was kind of like, yeah, okay, but it didn't make sense to me. Like the language didn't even make sense to me, really. And so then I had this moment which came completely out of the blue. Was with Lenny, and he was just 3, so he was like speaking, but I mean speaking a lot of nonsense most of the time. And so when Lenny was born, so I should say, and I'm always quite open about this, that Lenny, I was on the coil when I got pregnant with Lenny. So we'll talk about that another time, because that was a huge shock and really difficult for me at the time. But he was unplanned, and then he arrived, and obviously Lenny is now, you know, my world in many, many ways. Obviously I have Theo as well, and Adam, but you know, he's my firstborn. And he was born with a strawberry on his head, so this little red mark. And you know, I didn't think anything of it. Everyone said to me, oh yeah, that, you know, it'll go in a couple of months, whatever. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then he was sitting talking to me one day at 3 years old, and I just moved his little fringe, and his strawberry was fading. And I was like, oh, Len, your strawberry's going. And he looked me in the eye and went, "Mummy, will I die?" And it honestly, even now talking about it, makes me feel really strange because I'd never spoken to him about death. I mean, he's 3 years old, and just those words coming out of his mouth shocked me enough as it was. And luckily, I was living with my mum at the time, and she like poked her head round because she was standing in the kitchen and kind of looked at me like, "Why would he say that?" And so I said, "No, why would you say that?" And he said, "Because you remember when I was in Spain and I lost you, and a man took me and he hit me over the head, and then I froze. And then I was in your tummy and I got all my legs and my arms and my face, and then I found you again." Right? So he told me that story. My mum, listening to it, looked at me and was like, "What on earth is he talking about?" And it was just too much information. Spain, we'd never been to Spain. He doesn't know what a country is. To think that he was hit overhead or even taken by someone, a man, like these aren't things that he could know or even be familiar with as a 3-year-old. It just felt too true and it felt too detailed. And I was just like, I've got to find out what this is. So I messaged Becky, as I do all the time now, when things happen to me and I don't understand them. And you were so calm about it, and you were like, "Yeah, he's basically at that stage where he's young enough to remember what might have happened in past lives, but old enough to vocalize it if, he's verbal. And something's kind of triggered it, which is obviously the birthmark." And then I had no idea that birthmarks are a sign of how we left our, previous lifetime. And then when I started looking into that, I mean, God, it's incredible what came up around, birthmarks basically connecting the dots in, how children were killed and like children being able to take them back to these places. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. So I was like, okay, this has opened my mind to a possibility that, astrology might be real. There might be past lives. We're here for a reason. I knew that anyway, but that there might be future lives. And so then when we started talking and you were sharing some of your experience around getting pregnant with your children and how, and you'll be able to explain this much better than me, but how our children come to us, they choose us for a reason, and maybe that's to complete a karmic cycle in a past life. But that Lenny chose me, and that, no matter what contraception I was on, we were going to come back together because he lost me, and this was his way of coming back to me at that time, where our charts would cross. And it changed everything. Like that, I suddenly could make peace with the fact that I fell pregnant unexpectedly. It made me feel so excited about people who were pregnant because I was like, if you knew, like, the chances of you being brought back together with this baby and that you've got like a mission in this lifetime together, it was just completely mind blowing. Like, it makes me shake when I talk about it because it was just, it really, and this sounds dramatic, but when I fell pregnant with Lenny, I lost faith. I really, up until that point, I'd felt like I could ask the universe what I want and it would happen. And then when that happened, I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand why this has happened to me because there was so much that I wanted to achieve and share with people. Like, I was on a mission to help people. And how was I going to do all that stuff? Like, open new studios and all the rest of it when I had this baby. And, I signed the contract for Edgbaston and all that stuff. It just couldn't have been worse timing. And I lost faith in like my trust in the universe. And then when I realized this about astrology and like us coming back together, I literally felt like I had regained faith and trust, and I wasn't angry anymore, and I was grateful again. And it was really important for me to feel that. So yeah, then I just basically was annoying Becky for a long time, asking all about astrology and what it all means and how it all works. And like a whole new world opened up to me. And then I was doing long trips from like Devon to Worcester all the time. And so I'd listen to all these astrology courses and podcasts and things like that. So I know a bit about it, but nowhere near as much as Beck. And now it's, if anyone talks to me about like anything, this because I keep referring them to you, if they're like struggling in their life with their relationship, whatever it is, I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's stuff in the past in the south node, and maybe your mission in this lifetime, we can see what it is in your north node, and this is why you're going through this struggle, and whoever your partner is and what they're going through will be in their birth chart too. And you can see now, like, it's a map, right, of how you can navigate this lifetime to fulfill your purpose. And that's really how I feel about astrology. you know, I was focused on yoga for a long time and still am, obviously, because I believe that yoga gives us the tools to get through this lifetime. And what I mean by that is it gives us self-regulatory tools in terms of keeping our body well enough to do what we need to do in this lifetime, to be able to live long enough to do it, if you like, if that's, you know, what we're meant to be doing. And also mentally to be able to cope with the struggle so that we don't crumble and then not achieve what we're here to do, right? To be able to stay positive, calm, whatever it might be, to be able to get us there. So for me, yoga gives us the tools to cope. And without yoga, I mean, I just have no idea how people do it. This life is so bloody hard. Like, there's challenges everywhere, proper challenges, money, health, whatever. Without yoga, I just don't think anyone stands a chance, to be honest. And then, but that was great, and that got me to a certain point, but I still felt pretty disconnected with, like, bigger than that, bigger than this world, you know? And then astrology now has connected me to that, to a bigger purpose, a bigger reason, a bigger why, and has allowed me to see like the real beauty and, yeah, that synchronicity of like why we're here, why we meet each other, and what we're here to do in this lifetime. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you messaging, I think on WhatsApp about your experience with Lenny, and it was like we were doing the teacher training, weren't we? Like that weekend.
Yeah.
And we ended up talking a lot about it. And then I remember looking into your chart and explaining some things for you. And you were like, oh my God, yeah, like that makes so much sense. And that was very much my experience. And the more that I've dived into astrology as well, you know, like early psychologists like Freud and Jung used astrology. And I'm pretty sure world governments have astrologers. And there's a saying that is millionaires don't have astrologers, but billionaires do. And that was J.C. Penney who says that. And like when you look back in time in history, people have always looked to the stars for guidance. You know, it was the way of knowing the time of day, the time of year, when to plant crops, when to harvest, when it was going to rain as well. And they observed how nature and everything behave differently depending upon the alignment of planets. And we have become so disconnected from that. So I really feel like my kind of mission with astrology, yeah, I love looking at people's birth charts, but it's really a bigger mission because it's about it, and this is where it kind of overlaps with yoga. It's actually seeing that everything is connected. All systems in your body are connected. We are connected to each other, and we are, you know, connected to the stars as well. And really, you know, astrology is a symbolic system, and it's an ancient practice that interprets the positions and movements of celestial bodies, stars, planets, to provide insight into the human behavior, life, events, and our personal characteristics. So it really is based on this idea that there is this meaningful correlation between the cosmic environment at the time of an event. Most commonly, we talk about, you know, when someone was born, and the qualities or outcome of that event. And that's what your birth chart is. And I want to link that back to something that Buddha says, which is being born as a human is as rare as a blind sea turtle swimming in the vast ocean, surfacing once a year and by chance putting its head through a floating ring. That is like how rare it is to be living your human life right now in this moment. So we've got to stop acting like everything's a coincidence. You know, that we would have chosen the time to incarnate based upon the properties of the planets in order to give us the best chance to, we talk about self-actualization, but yeah, to follow your path of purpose and your path of dharma. And yes, like some astrology can be challenging, but you're meant to meet that challenge. You know, we talked earlier about, you know, your journey and the death of your father. Like that was a pivotal moment. The astrology would have been huge, and we should look at that one day. But that is the thing that kind of that redirected you on your
Mm.
path.
Yeah, and I felt that. And at the time, it's one of those things, isn't it? I think at the time it's really hard to see this stuff. Maybe if I'd known astrology then and had better tools, then I would have seen it differently. But at the time, I didn't feel like that at all. But now looking back, yeah, I absolutely see that. And I think that's the beauty of this kind of lens, this way of living is the trust, is that, you know, it is all happening for us, and it doesn't always feel like that, but in some way at some point we'll be able to see that. And if it's challenge, it's making us stronger, or it's leading us in a different direction, maybe the one we're meant to be. You know, even relationships, it's like I often talk about the teacher training, you know, how like Sam was part of my life to take me to Worcester to meet the people, and then we went our separate ways. And it was interesting when, you know, when I met Matt Adam, it was like straight away we were like, okay, this is the real deal. We got engaged really quickly. I fell pregnant with Lenny really fast, you know. And funnily enough, same with Sam, you know, and his partner. So it's this like real trust that everything that happens to us and all the people that come to us, you know, doesn't mean it's forever, but it means that at that point in our life, that's what's meant for us. And just keep trusting that. And it's just such a lovely way to live, in this sense of it is all meant to be. And that doesn't mean that it's all going to be positive and lovely. It means it's going to be really hard, but that we have that faith that even in the hardness is the purpose. And so yeah, I think my like mantra is now, you know, yoga gives us the tools to get through life, and astrology gives us the map to show us where we're going. And that's, I think, why we feel so passionate about sharing this information, because without either, I think it's really difficult to be alive, right? And living on a day-to-day basis without those tools, without that faith and that trust and that connection to self. So yeah, we've got a lot to share on all of these individual topics in a lot of detail, but that's kind of our intro as to what we're going to be doing, why we think it's important, and how we came to it.
Yeah, so exciting.
So exciting. And so what our next episode is going to be on is looking at health specifically. So how yoga can help with health, how astrology can help with your health. And then there's loads of topics that we want to explore after that. We'll be going into relationships, appearance, connection to self, lots more. So I can't wait. I'm absolutely buzzing to get all this stuff out there. And I just hope everybody, you know, enjoys it as much as we do and gets as much from it as we do, because it's been, you know, it's everything for us now, isn't it?
Yeah, can't wait to share some more.